down on the bed next to her, bracing himself for what was likely to be a lengthy discussion. "Is anything going on between you and Nara?" Stella's question hit him like a sudden jolt. He hadn't expected her to notice or comment on their awkward behavior. The question left him momentarily speechless. How do you mean?" Gordon asked, struggling to maintain his composure. "Come on, don't feign ignorance," Stella said, her voice edged with both care and curiosity. "Did anything happen?" Gordon sighed deeply. He knew Stella wasn't one to let things go easily, and her perceptive nature meant she wouldn't be easily satisfied with vague answers. "It's nothing I can't handle," he said, trying to downplay the situation. "I just want to know what the problem is," Stella pressed gently. "You two don't speak to each other anymore. You don't even eat at the table together, and when you do, it's always in silence." Gordon gave a small, forced smile. "We are fine," he said, though his tone was less convincing than he had hoped. "Gordon, do not lie to me," Stella said firmly. "I know you well enough to sense when you're avoiding the truth, so tell me what happened." He hesitated, wrestling with the decision of how much to reveal. "We just had a misunderstanding, that's all," he said finally. He couldn't bring himself to discuss the kiss or the argument. He wasn't ready to share that level of detail. "Then apologize to her," Stella advised, her tone gentle but insistent. "So you both can go back to normal. I don't like this silent treatment." Gordon managed a reassuring smile. "I will. You don't have to worry about that." Stella's gaze softened as she reached out and took his hands in hers. "You know you're like a son to me. And I can't watch you break down right in front of my eyes. You hardly eat your meals, you're always moody. I know it's not just a misunderstanding. Something significant must have happened, and I understand you don't want to tell me. But follow your heart and do what's right." With a final affectionate pat on his hand, Stella rose from bed. "Good night, my child," she said softly, heading towards the door. As she closed the door behind her, Gordon fell back on the bed, deep in thought. Stella's words had struck a chord. He had been gloomy ever since the fallout with Nara, and the avoidance had only deepened his mental state. He had initially thought distancing himself would help, but it only seemed to make things worse. Lying there on his bed with his eyes shut tightly, Gordon's mind raced between the conflicting desires to either follow Stella's heartfelt advice or stick with his original plan. His thoughts tangled with uncertainty and regret. As he pondered his next move, exhaustion slowly overtook him. His eyes grew heavy, and despite the turmoil in his mind, he eventually drifted off to sleep, hoping that in the morning, clarity would come with the light of day. Edward sat in his car. He wore a gloomy expression on his face, and his mind was etched with worry. His company teetered on the brink of collapse, and he was desperate for a solution. The one person who could potentially save him was Gordon Antonov. Convincing Gordon to invest was crucial, especially as other investors were threatening to withdraw their support. His phone rang, snapping him from his troubled reverie. He glanced at the screen. Gwen, his wife? He sighed and let the call go to voicemail. He wasn't in the mood for conversation. The phone rang again, and this time he knew he had no choice but to answer. Gwen's voice came through, laced with frustration. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for ages." "I didn't hear it ring," Edward replied, trying to keep his tone nonchalant. "Well, when are you coming home?" "It's getting late," Gwen pressed. As Edward looked out the window, he saw the sky darkening, and the first droplets of rain began to fall. People hurried to find cover, adding urgency to the scene. "I'll be home soon," he said, rolling up the window as the rain started to intensify. "Don't be too late. Dinner is almost ready," Gwen said before ending the call. Edward sighed deeply, setting his phone aside on the seat. The car slowed, and he looked up to see the imposing villa of Gordon Antonov. Its grandeur was unmistakable. The roof alone seemed to dominate the landscape. Edward allowed himself a small, confident smile, certain that Gordon, as his son-in-law, would be inclined to help. After all, wasn't family supposed to support each other? As the car approached the massive gates, two men in black suits emerged, each holding an umbrella that shielded them from the now steady rain. They walked toward the car, and one of them tapped lightly on the driver's window. The driver lowered the window, and one of the suited men asked, Who are you and what are you looking for? Edward cleared his throat to announce his presence. Open the gates. I'm your boss's father-in-law, he said, his voice imbued with confidence as he awaited their response. Hold on, one of the men replied and turned back toward the villa, leaving the other man to watch over Edward's car. Edward felt a sting of humiliation. It was clear the man had gone to verify his identity and seek permission from Gordon. Nonetheless, he knew he had to endure this minor indignity. After all, he was the one in need of a favor. Edward's gaze lingered on the villa's majestic exterior, a stark contrast to his own home. He stifled any outward signs of surprise and steeled himself for the conversation ahead. He knew that, despite the villa's grandeur and his current predicament, his only focus had to be on securing Gordon's investment. As the driver found a parking space and brought the car to a stop, another bodyguard appeared holding an umbrella. He swiftly opened the car door for Edward, shielding him from the rain and guiding him toward the villa. Upon entering, Edward couldn't hide his astonishment. The villa was exquisitely furnished, each detail reflecting Gordon's refined taste. The paintings on the walls alone spoke volumes about Gordon's sophistication. Edward estimated each one was worth at least $1 million. Good evening, sir. He turned to see an elderly woman in front of him. Edward surveyed her from head to toe, irritation clear in his voice. Who are you? You must be Nara's father, Stella said, pressing on despite his rudeness. That doesn't answer my question. Who are you and what gives you the right to speak to me? Edward demanded sharply. Stella was taken aback. She had heard about Edward from Nara but had not anticipated such rudeness. I am the head maid here, Stella replied calmly. Edward laughed derisively. A maid who clearly doesn't know her place. How dare you address my daughter by her first name? Do you have no manners? Stella remained composed. What would you like for refreshments, sir? She asked, making an effort to keep her tone respectful despite her frustration. Edward glared at her. Her calm demeanor and the perceived disdain in her eyes irritated him further. Get me my son-in-law, he ordered. Don't worry, Stella. I'll handle this. Gordon cut in as he descended the stairs. He had overheard the entire exchange and was not pleased with Edward's behavior. The apple, it seemed, did not fall far from the tree, he thought to himself as he remembered his last encounter with Yvonne. Ah, Gordon, I didn't hear you come down, Edward said, trying to hide his surprise. Gordon smiled at Stella and said, You can continue with your duties, patting her shoulder lightly. Stella smiled and returned to her work. Edward was taken aback. He struggled to understand why Gordon, a man of such influence, would show such familiarity with a mere maid. Let's head to the living room, Gordon said, leading the way. Edward had thought he'd seen luxury before, but as he entered the living room, he was struck by the sheer opulence of Gordon's living room. He finally understood that there really was a class system and Antonovs sure were the upper class. As Edward settled into one of the plush chairs, he glanced around, taking in the lavish surroundings. I didn't realize you were so friendly to the maid, he remarked. Who is a maid? Gordon asked sharply. Edward was taken aback by the sudden change in tone. The woman from earlier, he clarified. Oh, you mean Stella, Gordon said, his voice growing tense. Yes, Edward responded, his eyes lighting up with realization. She's not a maid, Gordon stated firmly. Huh? Edward's confusion was evident. Stella is not a maid, Gordon repeated, his voice now tinged with irritation. But she— Why have you come to see me? Gordon interrupted, cutting off Edward's explanation. The shift in Gordon's demeanor was jarring. He seemed far removed from the man Edward had invited to dinner. Gordon's strict gaze and authoritative tone made Edward uneasy, and he found himself stumbling over his words. Get to the point, I don't have all day, Gordon said, his impatience palpable. Edward cleared his throat, trying to compose himself. I'd like to ask you a favor. A favor, you say? Yes. What kind of favor are we talking about? Gordon asked, his curiosity piqued but still guarded. Edward struggled to find the right words. He couldn't disclose the full extent of his company's troubles, nor could he admit that his investors were pulling out. He needed to present something enticing to pique Gordon's interest. I have a business idea that I'd like you to invest in, Edward said finally. Gordon's expression softened into a smile. A business idea? He echoed, feigning his interest in what he was saying. Yes, Edward said. Tell me, what is it about? Gordon asked. Edward swallowed nervously. He was unsure why he felt so tense, but the way Gordon looked at him was intimidating. For a moment, he questioned his decision to come here. It's real estate, Edward finally said. Go on, Gordon prompted. It's not exactly real estate, but something close to it. I plan on building a large luxury shopping mall, Edward explained. Okay, that sounds good, Gordon said with a smile. Edward's spirits were lifted with excitement. The only problem is funding. I have other investors interested, but I wanted to bring this to you in case you were interested, he said. What do I stand to gain from this? Gordon inquired. Edward's relief was palpable. He was glad Gordon was interested. Well, your profit depends on how much you invest. Gordon's smile faded as he scrutinized Edward. What makes you think I'd want to invest in your half-baked business plan? Edward's heart sank. He hadn't expected this reaction. Look here, the only reason I even agreed to listen to you is because you're my wife's father. I didn't expect such a ridiculous proposal, Gordon snapped. Edward was taken aback, unable to believe a man younger than him could speak so dismissively. However, he wasn't ready to give up. Don't you think you owe me? Gordon laughed incredulously. Owe you? How so? Edward stood up, meeting Gordon's gaze squarely. For marrying my daughter without my consent. Let's use this investment as... Tell me, Mr. Vespertine, are you going broke, huh? Edward remarked. Gordon's question cut through him, catching him off guard. Yes, why else would you come to me asking for an investment and using my marriage to your daughter as an excuse? Are you going mad? Gordon's tone was sharp and dismissive. Gordon, I won't stand here and let you speak to me like that, Edward retorted, trying to maintain his composure. Come to think of it, when have you ever considered Nara your daughter? Gordon continued, his voice laced with contempt. That's none of your business, Edward snapped back, his face reddening. Gordon stood up, straightening his clothes with a deliberate gesture. I don't have time to waste on you. And let me remind you, if you ever come into my home and speak to anyone here the way you did earlier, I won't guarantee your safety on your way out, Gordon said coldly before turning and leaving the room. Edward, seething with anger, felt humiliated. Gordon had made him look foolish, and the rejection stung even more because he had been forced to discuss his business idea only to be dismissed. Realizing the visit had been a mistake, he sighed deeply and headed toward the entrance. As he turned a corner, he collided with Nara. Dad? Nara exclaimed, clearly surprised to see him. What? Why are you here? She asked, confusion etched over her face. Edward glared at her, his frustration growing. The words Gordon had said echoed in his mind, and though he was tempted to push her aside, the bodyguards around seemed to hold him back. Get out of my way, he shouted, shoving her aside before making his way to the car. Nara watched in shock, unable to understand why her father was so upset. She turned to find Stella, who was coming out of the kitchen. Stella, what's happening? Why was my father here, and why did he leave so angry? Nara asked urgently. He came to see Gordon, Stella replied. Hearing this, Nara rushed upstairs, leaving Stella alone. She barged into Gordon's room just as he was unbuttoning his shirt, and immediately closed her eyes. I'm sorry, she apologized with her eyes tightly shut. Gordon, his expression unreadable, finished buttoning his shirt and said, You can open your eyes now. Nara sighed in relief and opened her eyes. I saw my father leave just now. Stella said he came to see you. Yes, Gordon confirmed, his demeanor still cool. Nara approached him with concern. I hope he didn't say anything bad to you, she asked, her voice tinged with worry. No, we just talked, Gordon replied tersely. Talked about what? She pressed, trying to understand why her father had left in such a state. Business, Gordon said dismissively, not wanting to delve into details he deemed irrelevant. Okay, I hope... Nara's voice trailed off. Gordon looked at her. What were you about to say? Nothing. I will get going now, she said finally and left, closing the door behind her. Gordon watched as she left, closing the door behind her. He felt a pang of longing, wanting to reach out and hold her hand, but he restrained himself. He had to stick to the plan, no matter how difficult it was. Nara, standing just outside the door, felt her heart race uncontrollably. She missed him. The fact was undeniable, but she struggled to admit it. She missed their conversations. She wanted to ask if he was okay, but she could not. Ever since their misunderstanding, she rarely saw him, and the time she did, he didn't even look her in the eyes. She was torn between her feelings and her commitment to Andrew. As much as she missed Gordon, she knew that staying away from him was the best idea if she wanted to keep her relationship with Andrew. Gwen sat in her room, surrounded by the quiet elegance of her personal space. Her wardrobe, a tall oak structure with delicate carvings, stood open, revealing an array of dresses meticulously arranged. She examined each dress with a focused seriousness, her furrowed brow betraying her anxiety. The only sound that could be heard was the sound of platters of rain that fell against the roof. The sudden knock on the door shattered and distracted her focus from what she was doing. Gwen's heart skipped a beat as she hoped it was Edward, her husband. She rushed to the door, her movements quick and impatient. However, her anticipation turned to frustration when she saw Selina, the housemaid, was standing in front of her instead of Edward. "What?" Gwen barked, her voice tinged with irritation. Selina, accustomed to Gwen's occasional brusqueness, remained composed and said, "The table is set, ma'am. Dinner is ready." Gwen's expression soured as she rolled her eyes and shut the door abruptly. She turned away and moved to the window, drawing back the curtain to reveal the encroaching darkness outside. The fading light mirrored her growing concern. Edward had rarely stayed late nights, and he had not been home until that moment bothered her. With mounting anxiety, Gwen approached the bed and picked up her phone. She dialed Edward's number, her fingers trembling slightly. The phone rang persistently without being answered, and her worry deepened with each unsuccessful attempt. She tried calling again and again, her frustration mounting as the calls went unanswered. After a deep, uneasy sigh, Gwen left her room and descended the stairs to the dining room. The scent of the evening meal, usually comforting, seemed to heighten her apprehension. Yvonne was already seated at the table. She was busy with her phone as she waited for Gwen to come downstairs. "Mum, finally, you're here." "I'm so famished," Yvonne said, her voice a mix of relief and hunger. Gwen approached her daughter with a sullen look, the weight of her worry evident. "Your dad is not back yet," she said quietly. Yvonne's expression turned from relief to concern. "Dad is not back yet? What's keeping him outside?" she asked, confusion coloring her tone. Gwen shook her head, her own confusion evident. "I don't know," she admitted. Just then, the entrance door swung open with a sharp creak, and Edward walked in. Gwen's heart leapt at the sight of him, but her relief was short-lived. As she moved towards him with a welcoming smile, her expression faltered. Edward's face was a mask of frustration, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a deep frown. His eyes were hard, and his posture rigid. "What's wrong?" Gwen asked, her voice tinged with concern. Edward's response was cold. His anger from an earlier confrontation at Gordon's house lingered, making him unresponsive to Gwen's greeting. He stared at her with a blank intensity before turning and heading upstairs, his steps heavy and resolute. Gwen stood rooted to the spot, her heart beating. Edward's unusual behavior left her stunned. In all their years of marriage, he had never acted this way. Her mind raced with worry, desperate to find out the cause of his sudden behavior. "Mummy, what's wrong with Dad?" Yvonne asked, her voice filled with concern. Gwen, unable to offer a clear answer, glanced at her daughter before brushing past her. Determined to uncover the reason behind Edward's behavior, Gwen hurried upstairs, her thoughts a whirl of anxiety and determination. Edward stormed into his bedroom, his frustration evident in every movement. The door slammed shut behind him with a resounding crash that echoed through the house. The tie around his neck, once neatly knotted, was now loosened and hanging crookedly. His face, usually composed and calm, was now a canvas of fury and despair. Gwen, having followed him, closed the door quietly behind her, her heart racing with worry. She approached him with careful steps, her face etched with concern. "What's wrong? What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly as she reached out to him. Her worry was palpable, evident in the deep furrows of her brow and the anxiety that flickered in her eyes. Edward's response was sharp and dismissive. "Leave me. I want to be left alone," he snapped, his voice harsh and unyielding. The force of his words startled Gwen, but she was not one to be easily deterred. Her determination to understand his problem was unwavering. She refused to retreat and pressed on, her concern outweighing his desire for solitude. "Talk to me. What happened?" She pressed further, her voice steady despite the rising tension. Edward, exhaling in frustration, met her gaze. Her face was a mirror of sincere concern, and he recognized that he had no choice but to share his burden with her. I went to see Gordon," Edward admitted, his voice laden with a mixture of frustration and defeat. Gwen's eyes widened in surprise. "Gordon? What for?" she asked, unable to hide her shock. "Gwen, I'm on the verge of losing the company," Edward said, his voice cracking slightly. "The investors are breathing down my neck, demanding their money." Gwen's confusion deepened. "So, how does that concern Gordon?" she asked, trying to piece together the connection. "I went to ask for help. I wanted him to invest," Edward explained, his voice tinged with desperation. "And what happened?" Gwen inquired, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety in her chest. "You won't believe it." "He refused," Edward said, his tone laced with disbelief. "He told me straight to my face that my business idea was half-baked. He called it childish. You should have seen the way he spoke to me, so rude and dismissive." "What were you expecting?" Gwen asked, her question catching him off guard. "What do you mean by that?" Edward responded, a mix of confusion and defensiveness in his voice. Gwen moved to the bed and sat down, her posture reflecting a mix of exhaustion and resolve. "I mean, what were you expecting? That he would agree and embrace you with open arms?" She looked at Edward, her gaze firm yet compassionate. Edward was still trying to grasp her perspective, his mind struggling to understand her line of questioning. "Tell me, what's wrong with asking Gordon?" he asked, his voice filled with frustration. "Have you forgotten everything we did to Nara?" Gwen retorted sharply. "What makes you think she didn't tell him about us, huh?" Her voice rose with anger and hurt. Edward, visibly weary, sank onto the edge of the bed. "That's not enough reason for him to speak to me that way. He even called us broke," he said, his voice breaking. The word broke hit Gwen like a sharp sting. It resonated through her mind, inflicting a painful sense of humiliation. She looked at Edward, who was now brooding in his own misery. Her heart ached with a mixture of shame and anger. She realized that expecting Gordon to invest, given their history with Nara, had been a grave miscalculation. Gwen could not help but imagine Nara's satisfaction in witnessing their downfall. She knew Nara must have relished every moment of their humiliation. The need to act quickly became urgent. She needed to find a solution and salvage what remained. "Freshen up and come downstairs for dinner," Gwen said firmly, her voice masked with a veneer of calm determination. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked out of the room, closing the door behind her with a decisive click. Edward was taken aback by Gwen's reaction. He had expected a dramatic response, but her calm demeanor was unexpected. It left him puzzled, and for a moment, he questioned whether his emotions had been justified. Meanwhile, Gwen stood by the door, her hand gripping the doorknob tightly. Her anger and hatred towards Nara intensified, fueled by the realization of how deeply Nara had likely influenced Gordon's decision. As she stood there struggling with her emotions, Yvonne approached her, her face a mask of confusion and concern. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine worry. Gwen turned to her daughter, her heart heavy with the weight of the day's events, knowing that she had to navigate the turbulent waters ahead, both for her family and her own sanity. Gwen looked at her. She knew she needed to do something as quickly as possible. Otherwise, they would lose everything they had. Yvonne had never known a life of suffering, and she didn't want that for her. "Everything is fine. Come, let's go down for dinner," Gwen said immediately. Yvonne, still confused, stood at her spot. "What?" "Of Dad. He will be down soon. Let's go and have dinner." Nara lay in bed, restless and unable to find sleep. Her mind churned with thoughts about her father's recent visit to Gordon and Gordon's unsettling behavior. Tossing and turning, she grew increasingly agitated, unable to shake the worries that plagued her. The discomfort of her sleepless night heightened her sense of thirst. She reached for the jug of water on the bedside stool, only to find it empty. With a sigh of frustration, she slipped into her flip-flops and padded downstairs. In the kitchen, the cool glow of the refrigerator light greeted her as she opened its door. She retrieved 4 bottles of water, carefully pouring 3 into her jug. After filling it, she drank from the remaining bottle, savoring the relief as the water quenched her thirst. Just as she set the empty bottle down, faint sounds from the staircase caught her attention. Fear gripped her, and she picked up her filled jug with trembling hands. Her heart raced as she moved cautiously toward the kitchen door, every step magnifying her anxiety. Nara gently pushed the door open, her movements deliberate and wary. As she tried to step through, she collided with someone, letting out a startled gasp. Ah! The sound of her surprise echoed through the kitchen, her heart beating in her chest as she faced the unexpected presence. Gordon tossed and turned in his bed, unable to sleep. The room was dimly lit by the chandelier which hung on the ceiling. Suddenly, the window swung open and a rush of cold wind gusted into the room. Startled, Gordon leaped out of bed, his bare feet slapping against the cool floor as he hurried to shut the window. His stomach growled loudly, echoing in the quiet room. He paused for a moment, listening to the rumble of hunger, then made up his mind to get something to eat. As Gordon descended the stairs, the old wooden steps creaked under his weight. The house was silent except for the faint sound of rustling from the kitchen. He glanced at his wristwatch. He had an old habit since childhood to always sleep with his watch only to see that it was well past 2 in the morning. His mind raced with possibilities. Who could be in the kitchen at this hour? Initially, he considered Stella or Mel. However, he dismissed the idea quickly. Stella was known for her deep sleep and never woke up until morning, and Mel, who was easily frightened, wouldn't venture out alone in the dead of night. With a sense of unease growing, Gordon tiptoed toward the kitchen, his heart pounding. He placed his hand on the cool metal of the kitchen door and took a deep breath, readying himself to confront a possible intruder. He counted silently from 1 to 3, then pushed the door open abruptly. To his astonishment, Nara stood right in front of him, her wide eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and surprise. She let out a startled cry, clutching her chest as if to steady her racing heart. "What are you doing here?" Nara asked, her voice trembling with fright. Gordon, equally surprised, responded, "What are you doing here too?" His gaze fell on the jug of water Nara was holding, and he noticed the water she had just filled. Nara, still visibly shaken, explained, "I was thirsty and needed to refill my jug." Gordon nodded, his tension easing. "Oh," he said, realizing the situation. Nara observed him, her hands still shaking slightly. "Did you come to drink water as well?" she inquired. No, Gordon replied with a small smile. "I was hungry. I thought eating might help me sleep." Nara looked at him with raised eyebrows. "Hungry? By this time? Isn't it too late?" Gordon shrugged with a casual smile. "I couldn't sleep. Maybe a late-night snack will do the trick." He then walked past her into the kitchen. Nara watched in surprise as Gordon moved with purpose. "I didn't know you were a late-night eater," she remarked. Gordon proceeded to the pantry, rummaging around before emerging with a packet of noodles and some vegetables. He set the ingredients on the kitchen counter with a clatter. "Yes, today's an exception," he said, then went to another cabinet to retrieve a pot. Nara eyed the pot and the ingredients with curiosity. "Are you planning to cook that?" she asked, her tone a mix of amazement and curiosity. "Yes, of course," Gordon affirmed, preparing to start cooking despite the hour. Nara's eyes widened in astonishment as she took in the sight of Gordon cooking. She had never imagined that Gordon Antonov, with his poised and sophisticated demeanor, would be capable of preparing a meal. Her surprise was obvious as she asked, "You know how to cook?" Gordon, turning with a casual air, replied, "Of course, who doesn't know how to?" Nara approached him, her curiosity piqued. She perched herself on a high stool at the kitchen counter, her gaze fixed on him. "I didn't know you could cook," she admitted. Gordon flashed a knowing smile. "Stella taught me." Nara's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Stella? I knew she and you were close, but I didn't realize it was to this extent." "Surprised?" Gordon inquired, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Yes, definitely. Who would have thought Gordon Antonov could cook his own meals?" Nara responded, her voice tinged with disbelief. Gordon laughed heartily, clearly enjoying her reaction. "Well, watch and learn," he said, turning his attention back to the task at hand. Nara adjusted herself on the stool, her interest fully engaged. She observed Gordon as he turned on the gas cooker and placed a pot of water on it. His movements were methodical and precise. As he began chopping vegetables, Nara couldn't help but be impressed by his knife skills. Each slice was swift and accurate, showcasing a level of proficiency that suggested he had spent considerable time honing these skills. She found herself wondering why he hadn't pursued a career as a chef. His culinary expertise was undeniable. Gordon's concentration was obvious. His face was etched with focus as he worked, though he glanced at Nara occasionally, offering her a reassuring smile. Nara found herself captivated, unable to tear her eyes away from him. There was something undeniably attractive about his intensity, a fact she reluctantly admitted to herself. After a few minutes, the aroma of cooking noodles filled the kitchen. Gordon expertly dished out the noodles on 2 plates and set them down in front of Nara. With a flourish, he announced, "Ta-da!" his smile radiating satisfaction. Nara inhaled deeply, savoring the enticing scent that permeated the room. Gordon's proud grin suggested he knew exactly how delicious his creation was. Despite her reluctance to give him too much credit, Nara was eager to taste the dish. "Go on, give it a taste," Gordon urged, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. Nara picked up a fork from one of the plates and twirled the noodles around it. As she took a bite, her eyes widened in delight. The noodles were perfectly cooked, their texture tender and satisfying. She chewed slowly, her eyes closing in appreciation. The flavors melded together beautifully, making it the best bowl of noodles she had ever had. "How is it?" Gordon asked, his tone full of confidence. "This is superb," Nara replied enthusiastically, taking another forkful and savoring it. She couldn't contain her happiness as the delicious taste continued to impress her. Gordon's smile broadened, clearly pleased with her reaction. He moved to the stool beside her and sat down. "Seems like you're enjoying it." "Here, have more of mine," he offered. Nara waved her hand dismissively. No, I'm okay," she said between mouthfuls. "Are you sure?" Gordon pressed gently. "Yes," Nara insisted, though she continued to eat eagerly. When she finished her food, she let out a contented sigh and stood up. She went to the fridge, took out 2 bottles of water. Handing one to Gordon, she opened the other and drank deeply, quenching her thirst. Returning to her stool beside Gordon, she watched him with quiet admiration. Not only did he look hot while cooking, but he was also hot as he ate. She wondered why she had not noticed that when they ate at the dining table. Maybe this night was different, she thought to herself. Nara noticed that he ate quietly. He didn't make any slurpy sounds. Her fave was red with embarrassment as she remembered how she ate. She realized that maybe she might have been a little bit noisy when she ate hers. "Did my father say anything hurtful to you?" Nara asked. Gordon smiled. "I already told you he came to talk about business." "What kind of business?" The look in his eyes when I bumped into him sent shivers down my spine. Gordon laughed out loudly, almost choking. Nara rushed and handed him his bottle of water. She patted him on the back as he drank. When he was relieved, he looked at her. "Just some business talk about investing." Investing in what Nara asked, concerned. Something about him wanting to build a mall, but I refused. Why Gordon looked at Nara. I think your father is broke," he said casually and returned to his meal. Nara's eyes widened in surprise. She didn't know what to feel at the moment. The news somehow sounded right in her ears. Somehow she felt her father was paying for what he did to her. As Nara continued to watch Gordon eat, she suddenly recalled the night they had gone to her house to get her alarm clock. She remembered feeling a similar way then and wondered if Gordon had answered the question she asked before she fell asleep. "Why are you staring at me?" Gordon's question caught her off guard. "Huh?" Nara responded, surprised. Gordon turned to face her. "You've been staring at me for a while now? Why?" he asked, smiling. Nara smiled back. "Well, the night we went back to my house to get my mom's alarm clock, I think I was drunk. I remember asking you a question before I fell asleep." Gordon's eyes widened. That night, he had tried to kiss her and thought she might have forgotten about it, but he knew he couldn't forget. The wound on his arm from the broken window glass reminded him of it every day. "You fell asleep before I could answer," he said. "Really? What was the question I asked?" Nara asked. "You wanted to know more about me," Gordon said, recalling her question. Aha! Nara exclaimed, smiling. So tell me, Gordon, tell me more about yourself. Gordon was surprised. He realized she might have forgotten they weren't really on talking terms and wondered if she was drunk, but there was no alcohol around and her eyes showed genuine curiosity. Don't you think it's late? He asked, trying to avoid the conversation. Just tell me, Gordon. There's no rush, she replied. Gordon sighed. Well, as you know, my mother died when I was 12. My dad married Penelope a few years later and I moved out of the country. Is that all? Nara asked. Yes, Gordon muttered. What about Stella? Tell me about Stella, Nara prompted. Gordon smiled as he spoke. I've known Stella since I was born. She was my mother's personal maid and took care of me after she passed away. Stella left my father's house when I moved out of the country. Oh, really? Then why do you make her do all the household chores at your house? Nara asked. Gordon burst into laughter. I wondered why you never asked. Well, Stella is what I call a workaholic. I tried to get extra help around the house, but she refused. Sometimes I think she's just programmed to work, he said, still chuckling. Nara laughed along with him, and as they laughed, Gordon took her hands and clasped them gently. Nara looked at him, and suddenly remembered how she had slapped him earlier. She realized she needed to apologize. I'm sorry about the other day, she said. What? Gordon asked, confused. Nara mimed the slap to his face. Oh, that's fine. I deserved it, Gordon replied. No, I shouldn't have done that. It was uncalled for, Nara insisted. No, I was wrong. I should have known my place and stuck to what we agreed on in the contract, Gordon said. Nara smiled and nodded. You know, I've missed this, she said, gesturing between them with her hands. Gordon smiled back, surprised. All this time he had thought he was the only one who longed for this connection. I missed the way we talked and... Nara began, but Gordon felt his heart race as he listened to her. He looked at her, but as she continued speaking, it was as if he was barely hearing her. Are you listening to me at all? Nara asked, noticing Gordon's distracted expression. Gordon was struggling with his feelings for her. He wanted to kiss her right then, but Jeff's words were still echoing in his mind. As he stared at Nara, he couldn't hold himself back any longer. Damn the consequences, he thought, and suddenly pulled her closer, kissing her. Nara's eyes widened in surprise. For a moment she wanted to push him away, but she didn't. After a brief kiss, Gordon pulled back and looked at her, saying, I'm sorry. Don't be, Nara replied, pulling him back to her and kissing him again. As they pulled away from the kiss, Nara opened her eyes slowly, feeling a sudden wave of embarrassment. Everything had happened so quickly. Are you okay? Gordon asked with concern. Nara stared at him, feeling overwhelmed and unsure of what to say. I will be going to my room now, she muttered. Without waiting for a response, she hurried upstairs, not daring to look back. Once inside her room, she slammed the door shut and threw herself onto the bed, pulling the sheets over her. She squeezed her eyes tightly shut as the memory of the kiss replayed in her mind. She couldn't believe it had happened, but the tingling sensation on her lips confirmed that it was real. She had actually kissed Gordon. She remembered how he had wrapped his arms around her waist and the lingering scent of his body. Despite herself, she could not lie. Gordon was a great kisser. As she lay there, her thoughts swirled around. She realized that the emotion she felt after the kiss wasn't anger, but embarrassment. In some way, she had enjoyed the kiss they had shared. She couldn't believe that she had actually kissed him back. She was still unable to figure out how and why she did what she did, but in a way she liked it. The kiss had stirred up feelings she hadn't expected. This is going to be the last time, she promised herself. She knew she had to keep what had happened a secret from Andrew. As she closed her eyes to sleep, she wondered deep within herself if the kiss they had shared was really going to be the last time or not. Meanwhile, Gordon lay on his bed, his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. He had gone upstairs immediately after Nara had rushed upstairs. Kissing Nara was not a mistake, and he knew it. The first time they had kissed, he had convinced himself it was a fluke, but this time, it was different. He had kissed her willingly, and it felt right. Gordon was puzzled by his own emotions. Was he falling in love with her? There was something about Nara that drew him to her, something he couldn't quite explain. Whenever he saw her, he felt an undeniable pull. Even when he had mistakenly bumped into her in the kitchen, that act alone made his heart race. He enjoyed being around her so much that he found himself happy when she watched him cook. He even stole glances at her when she wasn't looking. Watching her watch him cook tingled a sensation inside of him. Something he had never felt for anyone in his entire life. He remembered the sound she made when she ate, a slight slurping noise that he found endearing and amusing. It made him smile to think that she had enjoyed the food he prepared. He was pleased that she liked it. As he touched his lips, the memory of their kiss lingered. He remembered the words she had whispered when their lips met, and he was surprised that she had kissed him back. The sensation of her lips against his was still fresh, and he couldn't help but think about how perfect it had felt. Gordon knew he couldn't deny his growing feelings for Nara. It was more than just physical attraction. There was a deeper connection he was starting to recognize. He felt a warm flutter in his chest whenever he thought about her. The idea of falling in love with her was both thrilling and at the same time confusing, but he couldn't ignore the feelings that were blossoming inside him. With a contented sigh, Gordon closed his eyes and smiled. The emotions and thoughts of the night had left him feeling strangely at peace. As he drifted off to sleep, he embraced the possibility of what might come next. The sound of Miriam's whimpers woke Peter from his sleep. Groggy, he rubbed his eyes and got up. He walked over to the dressing table, opened a drawer, and took out a pack of medicine. Picking up a bottle of water from the table, he went to her side. Miriam, Peter's wife, had been suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder for a long time. This condition began after the death of their only child. Often she would wake up at night screaming and shouting their son's name. Sometimes she would whimper softly or sit alone, brooding and talking to herself. At other times she would talk to a doll as if it were their deceased son. The death of their child had left a deep scar in their lives, and Miriam had never been able to recover fully. Peter had become accustomed to her nighttime episodes. Her soft whimpers did not alarm him anymore. They had moved abroad 10 years ago, hoping a change of environment might help Miriam feel better. But instead, her condition worsened day by day. Peter had consulted many top doctors, but their only advice was to give her time and let her be. Now, 20 years later, she was still the same. Looking at Miriam, Peter saw tears rolling down her cheeks. Her face was pale, and she was very thin, so different from how she had once been. Miriam used to be lively and beautiful, but since their son's death, she had deteriorated significantly. As he looked at her, he felt a deep sense of guilt. He wondered if perhaps she was suffering because of his past mistakes. "Miriam," he called softly. Miriam's eyes opened and she looked at him. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out, "My son! Where is my son?" she cried out again. Peter held her hands and drew her closer to him. She laid her head on his shoulders and held his hands tightly, not wanting to let go. "Where is my son, Peter? Where is Simon?" Peter kept quiet. He didn't know what to say. He had been doing this for over 20 years, and he was becoming tired of it. He just sat there and said nothing. Peter gently helped her sit up. He took out the medicine and handed it to her along with the bottle of water. "Drink this," he said softly. Despite her distress, Miriam knew she needed to take the medicine. She placed the tablet in her mouth and swallowed it with the water. Peter helped her lie back down and covered her with a blanket. He sat beside her, watching her until she fell asleep. When she finally drifted off, Peter let out a sigh of relief. The medication was a sleeping pill that soothed her nerves. Whenever her episodes began, the pill helped her fall asleep quickly. As Peter watched Miriam sleep peacefully, he wondered if he could bring her with him to the Antonov mansion for the family dinner. He worried that her episodes might start there again. He remembered that their son had often visited the Antonov mansion when he was alive, and Miriam had always gone there to pick him up. Knowing that seeing or remembering anything connected to their deceased son could trigger her episodes, Peter was concerned about how she would handle it. As these thoughts swirled in his mind, Peter slowly fell asleep, hoping for a peaceful night without having to wake up to calm Miriam's nerves, and wondering how to manage Miriam's condition during the upcoming family event. It was a quiet morning in the Antonov mansion. Jacob sat at the head of the dining table, deeply engrossed in the newspaper he held in his hands. In front of him was a plate with some bacon that had been partially eaten and a few leftover omelet pieces. While he continued reading the newspaper, he used his right hand to lift his coffee cup, carefully balancing the newspaper with his left hand as he took sips from his cup. Penelope sat next to Jacob, eating her breakfast in silence. Her expression was indifferent, and she occasionally glanced at Jacob, but otherwise kept her focus on her meal. Directly across from her, Briston was absorbed in his phone, scrolling through its contents without much attention to the others at the table. The peaceful morning was interrupted by the sound of Jacob's phone ringing. He shifted his attention from the newspaper and answered the call. After listening for a moment, he replied, "Okay, I will be on my way out soon." He ended the call and placed his phone down on the table. He then neatly folded the newspaper and set it on the table. Penelope, noticing Jacob's change in focus, asked with concern, "Who was that?" She set her cutlery aside and looked at him, her worry evident. Jacob reassured her, "Don't worry, it's just someone from work." He then reminded her gently, "Don't forget the dinner we planned with Peter tonight." He touched her hand lightly as he spoke. At the mention of Peter's name, Penelope's face showed clear displeasure. She seemed eager for the dinner to be over and clearly did not want to spend much time with Peter. "Why do you look like that?" Jacob asked. "Don't you like the dinner idea?" Penelope rolled her eyes and replied, "As if my opinion matters." Jacob, trying to lighten the mood, suggested, "Don't you think it's time you got to know Miriam?" "Miriam? Isn't she sick?" Penelope responded. Her lack of concern was obvious. Peter said she was getting better. "I feel so bad for her, I can't imagine the trauma she's going through." "What kind of trauma is she going through that she has refused to heal for over 20 years? Are you this heartless? Well, I am not surprised. I don't think you have lost someone so dear to you before." Jacob was frustrated by Penelope's lack of concern and could not understand her aversion to Peter and Miriam. "Just get everything ready," he instructed her. Just then, Briston, who had been absorbed in his phone, spoke up. "Are we still inviting Gordon and Nara?" Jacob nodded and replied, "Of course." Briston then said, "I need to inform Yvonne." Jacob's face tightened into a frown upon hearing Yvonne's name. He responded, "About that? Don't you think you should reconsider your plans with her?" Briston, taken aback, asked, "What plans are you talking about?" Jacob said, "The plans you have made with Yvonne. I don't think she's right for you." Briston, visibly upset, protested. "Dad! Why don't you like Yvonne, Dad?" he continued. "Huh? Yes, you hate her guts so much that you can't even pretend. That's because she's not food for you. Can't she be more like Nara, right?" Briston cut in sharply, interrupting him. Jacob's irritation grew. "Think about reconsidering your plans with her. I don't want someone tarnishing the family's name," he said. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, stood up, and left the room. Penelope looked at Briston and said, "Briston, the sooner you realize that your father is right, the better for you." She then stood up and walked out, leaving Briston alone at the table. Briston was deeply frustrated and angry. He hated being controlled and told what to do. He hated when his opinions never mattered. He clenched his fists in anger. His face turned red, and he slammed his fist on the table, causing the plates and cutlery to rattle. He was infuriated by his father's preference for Gordon. He just wished he had not made it obvious. He was still unable to understand why his father willingly accepted Nara even after finding out she was illegitimate, but he found it very difficult to accept Yvonne. Briston felt that his father's favoritism was unfair and made his frustrations worse. In a moment of intense defiance, Briston shouted, "I'm going to marry Yvonne whether you all like it or not." His voice was filled with determination. He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking his chair over, and stormed out of the house, his anger noticeable as he left the mansion. Nara woke up very early to prepare to leave for work. She still felt embarrassed and shy about the kiss which she had shared with Gordon the night before. She didn't want to meet him face to face that morning. Once dressed, she rushed downstairs and, in a haste to avoid seeing Gordon, she also bumped into Stella. "Where are you rushing off to?" Stella asked, surprised. "Good morning, Stella. I need to head out now," she said in haste as she looked up at the staircase, hoping that Gordon would not show up out of nowhere. "This early? Won't you wait for breakfast?" "Oh no. No. I will get something to eat once I get there," she said in haste. Stella was still not convinced by her excuse. She looked at her confusion etched on her face. It's unlike you two. Nara immediately rushed at her, pecked her on her cheeks. See you soon, she said, and rushed out. Tyler was ready waiting in the car when Nara got outside. She entered the car immediately and heaved a sigh of relief immediately. She was happy she had escaped meeting Gordon. She didn't know what she could have done if he had seen her. Where to, ma'am? He asked, looking at the rearview mirror. Dynasty Agency, Nara said softly. Tyler was surprised. Nara had always gone to Dynasty with Elena and the luxury bus, and he wondered why she opted for him to drive her. You are not going on the bus? He asked her, perplexed. No, not today. Ever since Andrew had told her about Elena being the one that told him about the contract, she'd been very angry with her. She knew Elena had a lot of explaining to do, and she was going to get it from her, but right now, she didn't want to share the same space with her. As soon as Tyler started the car, her phone buzzed with calls. She looked at it and saw that Elena was the one calling. She sighed and chided the phone aside. The call came again and again and again. Finally, Nara picked the call up. Hello, Nara, I have been trying to reach you for a while now. Where did you keep your phone? Elena asked, her voice filled with apprehension. I will meet you at Dynasty, you don't need to come get me. Nara said coldly, ignoring her earlier question. Why do you sound like that? Is anything the matter? Elena, meet me up at the agency. Bye, Nara said finally, her voice etched with irritation. She couldn't help but wonder why Elena had told Andrew about the contract. She had trusted her with it. That was why she had told her about it. Elena had a lot of explaining to do. She sighed deeply. She knew she needed to keep her head and thoughts on the day ahead of her. She had a runway rehearsal with other models, and she was a little bit tense about it. What if they don't like me? What if they do? Was the question that ran through her mind. Most of all, she wondered if Yvonne could be there. She knew Yvonne, upon seeing her, would waste no time in starting her usual tantrums, and she knew she was not in the mood for any of it. It was as if Tyler knew the mood she was in. He increased the volume of the music playing on the car radio. Nara smiled when she heard the song play. It was one of her favorite songs to listen to. She relaxed fully on the chair and closed her eyes, humming the song as it played. Nara had thought she would arrive at Dynasty early, but she was shocked when she walked in and saw most of the top models already there waiting in the big runway room. She peeked inside the door. She saw top models she had always admired and wished to meet, the way they sat in their seats with grace and demure. She suddenly felt her stomach churn and her heart began to beat. This was the first time she was to meet them. She didn't know the impression she was going to pass on them. Are you going to continue peeping, or will you get inside? A feminine voice asked her from behind. Nara shuddered and turned to see a tall, beautiful young woman standing in front of her. The woman smiled at her, flashing her perfectly set white teeth. Nara couldn't deny the fact that she was drop-down gorgeous. Her slender features also added to their beauty. She was a brunette, and her hair fell gracefully on her shoulders. 2. Nara stuttered. Wait a minute. I have not seen you around here before? The young woman asked her, scrutinizing her face. Hold on, are you Nara? Yes, Nara said softly. Oh my God, you are even more beautiful in person. Those pictures on the billboard didn't do enough justice to your pretty face. Nara could not help but smile. Thank you, she said softly. I am Stephanie, by the way, but you can call me Steph, she said, stretching out her hands toward Nara, obviously for a handshake. I'm Nara, Nara replied, shaking her hands. She laughed. I know that already, silly, you don't need to say it again, she said with a chuckle. Nara couldn't help but wonder about the kind of person she was. She laughed and smiled a lot. She found her quite interesting. Are you trying to get inside? Steph asked her. Yes, but you don't know how to write? She asked, cutting her short. Yay, Nara muttered with a smile. Steph smiled. First time meeting the girls, right? Nara shook her head in affirmation. Well, you don't need to be afraid. It happened to each and every one of us. Most of them are nice, and the rest, you know. She used her hands to feature crazy. Nara smiled. Just don't let them get into your head. You know what, why don't we walk in together? Nara heaved a sigh of relief. She was more than glad when Steph suggested it. At least the burden of walking in alone had been lifted from her shoulders. "Thank you. Thank you so much," Nara replied, smiling. Steph smiled. "Let's head inside," she said, and immediately opened the door to the runway room and stepped inside with Nara trudging behind her. Immediately they entered, all eyes were visibly on them. Nara was sure they were looking at her. Murmurs were heard from every corner of the room, and she was sure they were talking about her. As she walked, she was very grateful that Steph had opted to walk with her. She couldn't know what she could have done without her. Steph found 2 seats at the 4th roll. The other rolls had been occupied. As they sat down, Nara felt her heart beat. She had just walked past models she'd always wished to even get an autograph. She couldn't believe that she could one day sit with them in the same room. Her heart could not stop beating. "You see, it was not that hard," Steph whispered to her quietly when they had settled down. Everyone was just looking at us." Steph smiled. "They were looking at you." "Me?" "Yes, of course, I'm sure they all wanted to see how Gordon Antonov's wife looked like in person." Nara turned and faced her. How did you know about that?" "Nara, everyone seated in this room already knows that you are Gordon's wife." Nara became surprised. She didn't know her marriage to Gordon was that much of a big deal that even the models there knew about it. That explains why they were staying at her with so much interest. "Well, I think I will find my stay here quite interesting." Steph smiled. "You know, Nara, there is sort of a hierarchy in here." "Hierarchy?" Nara asked, confused. "Yes, of course. Each model is graded. The ones on the front roll, they are the A-grade model. The second roll are the B-grade models, and so on." Nara looked at the 4th roll. "So where does that leave us?" Steph smiled. "Isn't it obvious? But come to think of it, I don't think you should be sitting here," Steph said all of a sudden. "Why is that?" Nara asked, surprised. "You should be an A-grade model. Maybe when the director comes, he will rectify." "Huh?" Nara asked, still surprised. "You are an Antonov, of course." Nara became surprised. She couldn't understand what her being an Antonov had to do with her being an A-grade model. Almost immediately, the door to the showroom flung open. Nara raised her head to see who had just walked in, her face squeezed into a frown. Immediately, she saw who it was. It was Yvonne. "Oh my God!" Nara exclaimed upon seeing her. Steph turned and looked at her. "You know Yvonne?" "Yes," Nara muttered under her breath. "Wow. I guess Yvonne's mischievousness has also gotten to the public." "No, that's not it." "How do you mean?" "She's my sister." Steph's eyes widened in surprise. "Your what?" "My sister's stepsister, rather." "Oh my God!" Steph exclaimed in surprising. She never knew Yvonne had a sister, talk more of one who was married to Gordon Antonov. Nara ignored Steph's reactions and focused her gaze on Yvonne. She felt her heart beating and she prayed deep in her heart that Yvonne does not take notice of her. Her hopes were crashed when Yvonne turned her neck from where she sat and saw her. Nara gulped twice. "Nara, I can't believe Yvonne's your sister," Steph, still surprised, said. "I hope she's not coming over here." "Who?" Steph asked, confused. She raised her head up to see Yvonne walking towards their direction, her face folded into a scowl. With the way she walked, Nara knew she was coming again with her usual tantrums. I think she is coming towards us," Steph whispered. "Why does she have that look on her face?" "Steph, Yvonne and I don't see eye to eye. You are in a big mess. Yvonne is someone we don't mess with over here." "I know. She's my sister," Nara whispered back. Yvonne finally got to where they sat. She stared at Nara, then back at Steph. "Hey, you leave!" she barked at Steph. Steph stood up immediately, ready to excuse the both of them. Almost immediately, Nara held her hands. "She's not going anywhere," she said immediately, casting glaring eyes at Yvonne. "Nara, I think it's best I leave," Steph whispered to Nara. "What did you say?" Yvonne asked Nara. Nara stood up and faced her squarely. "I said she's going nowhere," she fired back, raising her voice a little bit. At that moment, everyone turned and looked in their direction. The charged atmosphere gripped everyone in the room, fixated on the escalating confrontation. The suspense hung heavy in the air. Steph was fixated at where she sat. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know if she could move or not. She just sat down there. Yvonne was shocked to her bones. She couldn't understand what gave her the audacity to speak to her in such a manner. All eyes were glaring at them already. She knew it was not the time to be weak in front of her. She already had a reputation of being fearless, and she had to do something as fast as possible. She looked at Nara. The glaring eyes she gave her alarmed her, but she knew she needed to be fierce. "It seems like you do not know your place here," Yvonne said finally. "What do you mean by that? Who the hell does this fourth-grade model think she is?" Yvonne spat out. Everyone burst into laughter at the mention of fourth grade. Nara looked around embarrassed. This was not the welcome she had planned at all. Nara looked around. Everyone stared at her. Their gawking eyes at her made her feel embarrassed. She turned and looked at Steph, who blinked and looked away. Steph knew it was best not to banter words with Yvonne. Nara turned her head and faced Yvonne. "Yvonne, what do you want?" she asked her finally. Yvonne sneered at her. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Rehearsals, of course. Or do you think I came here to play?" Now, since when did newly appointed models begin to walk the runway? Immediately they get signed. Nara became confused. "I don't understand." "You will never understand because you are so stupid and dumb to comprehend what I said." Immediately she said that, everywhere grew silent. Nara knew she had to fight for herself this time. She was not going to let her humiliate her, not in front of everyone and not on her first day meeting her colleagues. Nara smiled and walked closer to Yvonne. "The next time you open your gutter of a mouth to speak to me in such a degrading manner, I promise I will deal with you so badly you won't recognize yourself when you look in the mirror." Yvonne widened her eyes in surprise. She couldn't believe what she had just heard from Nara. "Who the hell are you?" "I am not done!" Nara shouted at her, cutting her abruptly, causing her to shudder fearfully. "Now, look here, Yvonne. If you don't like the idea of me being here, you can leave," Nara said, finally pointing towards the entrance door. "You speak to me in such a manner now, right? Seems like you have forgotten so easily, right?" Nara knew exactly what she was implying. The only weapon Yvonne had to overpower her was her mother, Gwen. When they were younger, Gwen meted out different kinds of unbearable punishments to her, one that she could never forget in a hurry. "I am going to tell Mum about this," Yvonne continued. Nara burst into tremendous laughter. She laughed so hard even Steph had to tap her lightly to ensure she was not going mad. "What's funny?" Yvonne asked her, confused. Nara sighed amusingly. "It seems like you have forgotten whose wife I am," Nara said. Yvonne looked at her dumbfounded. She was entirely speechless. Nara touched her cheeks, which were already red with anger. "My dear sister, watch your tone when next you speak to me, and I think it's time for you to head back to your seat." Yvonne looked around. She knew she had been defeated. She couldn't believe that Nara had belittled her in front of everyone. Yvonne had made herself the self-acclaimed queen of the dynasty. Nobody dared to cross her path. Her clash with Nara was a blow to her face. She knew standing there could make things worse. She knew she had to go back to her seat before the shame got out of hand. "This is not the end," she cried and made to leave. Then she stopped and turned to face Steph. "And you, watch your back," she said with a hiss and walked out to her seat. Nara felt her heartbeat wands, her hands shaking. She couldn't believe she had just given a piece of her mind to Yvonne. She sat down slowly and tried to compose her face, so the glaring eyes of other models wouldn't see her fear and bewilderment. "Jeez, that was a close call," Steph whispered. Nara turned and looked at her confused. "How do you mean, close call?" "You must have really gotten to her because the Yvonne I know should have landed slaps across your cheeks now." "I'm not surprised at all. The both of you sure must have a lot of bad blood. The look in her eyes could kill." Nara smiled. "Why did you want to stand up when she asked you to? You are still new here. You don't really know much about what is going on here." "What do you mean?" Nara asked, confused. "Yvonne is the queen of dynasty, the A grade of the grade A models, if you know what I mean." "Oh, really? But I think things will change around here." "How so?" "Well, because of you." Nara was still confused. "What do you mean because of me?" Steph smiled. "Don't worry, with time you will understand what I'm talking about." Nara nodded her head, although still confused. She was still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. She could still remain the look of deer on Yvonne's face when she mentioned her being married to Gordon. Never in her life had she ever thought that she was going to use him as a trump card. She raised her head up and saw Yvonne talking with some girls who sat with her in front. She knew they were talking about her, but she didn't care. The entrance door flung open. Harry, accompanied by a very tall woman, entered inside. The woman was tall and slender, and the baggy trousers and top she wore added to her slender frame. She was dark-skinned, and she looked like she was in her early 50s. Her hair was rolled in a bun. Nara looked at her, scrutinizing her carefully. She was sure she knew her, but she was not quite sure how. "Good morning, ladies," Harry greeted them, smiling at them. "Good morning, Harry," they all replied. "You all know why we have brought all of you together. We are having a runway shoot, and we have to select the best out from the best." There were murmurs everywhere. "Silence," Harry ordered. "You have a few days for rehearsal, and at the end of it we will make our picks." "Now you all know who is beside me," he said, touching the woman beside him. "Well, for those who don't know, this is Vanessa Crudge." The whole room erupted in a round of applause upon hearing her name. Nara's eyes lit in surprise. Vanessa Crudge was one of the biggest models in the 90s. She couldn't believe that for the next few days she would be coached by her. Her joy invariably knew no bounds. "Do any of you have any questions?" Harry asked, as his eyes peered at each of them. Everyone was quiet. No one made any comment. "Okay then. I have a question," Yvonne said proudly, interrupting Harry. Upon hearing Yvonne's voice, Nara felt her heart sink in. "Okay, go on," Harry said, permitting her. Yvonne smiled, turned back and looked at Nara, then smiled mischievously. "I thought it was a policy that newly signed models are not meant to share the runway with us for at least a period of 6 months," she uttered. Nara fell back to her seat. How could Yvonne try to belittle her in front of Harry and most especially in front of Vanessa? That's true." Yvonne smiled. "Then what's Nara doing here?" Everyone began to murmur. Some giggled. Yvonne stood there smiling mischievously. She had wanted Nara to pay for embarrassing her in front of everyone there. This was the right opportunity and she grabbed it. Harry searched the crowd with his eyes in search of Nara. His eyes lit up when he finally found her. "Nara, didn't your manager tell you?" Nara felt her palms sweaty and clammy. She didn't want to be embarrassed like that. "Huh? You were supposed to meet me in my office, so at least I can introduce you to the girls myself." "Huh?" Nara asked, perplexed. She was expecting him to tell her to leave, but his reaction was the opposite. "Why are you even sitting over there? You were meant to sit in front?" "Huh?" Nara exclaimed again. What the hell was happening? "Come over to the front." "Oh, no, I'm okay here. I don't see the reasons why we need to discriminate against ourselves." Vanessa, who had been standing and being a mere spectator of everything that was happening, smiled. "Okay then. It seems you have all met Nara. Welcome her fully into the group. I hope you all treat her well, and back to the question you asked Yvonne, there will be an exception made for Nara regarding company rules." "What?" Yvonne sparked out. Harry ignored her. "That will be all for now." Yvonne couldn't believe her ears. Everything was going absolutely opposite. She had expected Harry to ask Nara out, but he did quite the opposite. She did not also feel stupid. She also knew she had made a bad impression on Vanessa, who had been staring at her all this while. "Don't mind, Harry," one of the models sitting beside Yvonne said, tapping her on her back. "Get your hands off me," Yvonne thundered, and the girl removed her hands fearfully. "What just happened now?" Steph whispered to Nara. "I don't just know. I'm as shocked as you are." "I told you, didn't I? Things will change around here since you are here." Nara looked at her confused. She was still shocked, but in all she thanked her stars luck was really on her side today. She said to herself, "Okay, girls, that will be all for today. Tour rehearsals will begin tomorrow," he said, and with that he left the room with Vanessa trudging behind him. Nara heaved a sigh of relief. Finally, it was over. She had thought they were going to start rehearsals that day. She was happy it was not going to hold till the next day. They all stood up and began to leave one by one. "Aren't you leaving?" Steph asked Nara when she noticed that she made no move in getting up. "Oh, not now, but you can go. I need to make a few calls," she said, smiling. "Will you be okay by yourself?" "Oh, yes, sure. Why not? You can go. I will meet up with you later." Steph shrugged her shoulders and stood up. Okay then, see you later, she said, and with that she left. Nara sat back on her seat and closed her eyes and started breathing slowly. She had not really wanted to make any calls. She just wanted to be alone and try to process what had just happened since she arrived at Dynasty that day. She was so happy with how everything had gone, she giggled lightly as she shut her eyes. Suddenly, her phone rang, interrupting her sweet, solemn moment. She opened her bag and took out her phone. Her eyes lit in surprise when she saw the caller. It was Gordon. She had forgotten all about the kiss. Her mind had been occupied with her clash with Yvonne. Hello? She said softly. Hey, I woke up this morning and I didn't see you? Nara was surprised. Gordon sounded as if they had not kissed or done anything. Was he not as embarrassed as she was? I left early. I was in haste. Oh, okay. Dad's invited us for dinner again. Dinner again? Nara asked, surprised. She could still remember how the last dinner at her father's place ended. It was still fresh in her mind. I'm as surprised as you are, too. When is it happening? This evening. Huh? Don't worry about your dress. I will get you something nice to wear. Oh, okay, Nara muttered. Okay then, Gordon said, and hung up the call. Nara suddenly felt sad, partly because of the dinner at Jacob's place and also because Gordon did not say anything about their kiss. He talked to her as if nothing had happened between both of them. She suddenly felt so foolish about leaving the house in haste for nothing. She felt very stupid. Then again, the thought of the dinner at Antonov's mansion troubled her. The last dinner was still fresh in her head, and she had not heard from Jacob ever since. Then, she suddenly realized that, since it was a family dinner, Yvonne was certainly going to be there. She shook her head in frustration. She didn't quite understand why she was seeing Yvonne more often than usual. Elena waited patiently for Nara on the luxury bus in front of Dynasty. Her eyes were fixated on the window, waiting to catch sight of Nara. As she waited, she couldn't help but wonder why Nara had gone to Dynasty without her. This was something she had never done before. Ever since she became her manager, they have been going to work together. She felt something was off, judging from the way she spoke to her over the phone, as she stared outside waiting for Nara. She tried ransacking her head to see if she had done or said something wrong, but she couldn't think of anything. She looked at her watch and wondered what was keeping her inside. She knew the rehearsals had been moved till the next day. She watched as people trooped in and out of the building, but there was still no sign of Nara. She sighed in frustration. She decided to go in by herself. As she made to stand up, she suddenly saw Nara walk out of the building. Finally, she said, smiling. She quickly opened the bus door and waved at Nara to get noticed, but she was not looking in her direction. Nara! She called out and walked quickly to meet up with her. Nara heard her name being called by a familiar voice. She turned and saw Elena walking towards where she stood. At that moment, she felt a churn in her stomach. She looked at Elena and immediately the thought of her betrayal began to play in her mind. She still could not believe that Elena had told Andrew about the contract. The thought of this fused her anger the more. As Elena got closer, her anger increased the more. She didn't want to talk to her at the moment. She was not ready to listen to anything she had to say. Nara immediately turned her face and pretended not to have seen her. She began walking away. But Elena was quick in action. She held her by her hand almost immediately. Nara, I have been calling you since. Didn't you hear me? Nara sighed irritatedly and turned to face her. I didn't hear you, she said, feigning ignorance. Elena looked at her for a while, unsure of whether to believe her or not. Let's get onto the bus. I have been waiting for you for a while. Let me take you home, she said, finally pointing towards the bus. Nara looked at the bus and feigned a smile. Don't worry, Tyler's already waiting for me. You can take the day off. Huh? Elena exclaimed, surprised. I said you should take the day off. I heard that, but I don't understand why you are sounding cold. Nara feigned a smile. I need to get home, Lena. Take the day off, she said, and made to turn. But Elena held her back again. Okay. At least tell me how the briefing went today. I heard Vanessa Krudge will be coaching you guys, she said, smiling, trying to lighten the mood. Nara looked at her coldly as she tried so hard to suppress her anger. Yes, she is. The briefing went well. Can I leave now? She said, pulling her hands away from Elena's grip. At that moment, Elena realized that something was actually wrong. Nara had never behaved in such a cold manner to her before. She wondered about what must have happened. "Nara, did I do something wrong?" she asked softly. Her question infuriated her the more. Nara wondered how brazen she was to ask her such a question. "Elena, I don't have time for this. I have dinner I need to prepare for. Can we talk about this another time?" "No," Elena shouted, catching Nara off guard. At that moment, people passing by stopped to look at them. Nara looked around and feigned a smile to ease their minds and make them walk away. "Do you have to be this loud?" she asked Elena, still looking around. "Nara, I know you very well, and I know something is bothering you. And I am not leaving here till I get my answers," she said firmly, not minding the people standing and watching them. "Look, Elena, I do not have the time for this." "Did I do anything wrong?" Elena asked, interrupting her. Nara looked around. People were beginning to put interest into their discussion. She looked at Elena. She knew Elena would be adamant at times. She knew she was not going to let her go until she had said what was wrong. Nara sighed and walked straight to the bus. She entered it with Elena following her and shutting the bus behind her. "Greg, can you excuse us for a minute?" Nara ordered the driver, who had been sitting waiting for them all this while, inside the bus. "Okay, ma'am," he said, and left, closing the door. Nara folded her hands and faced Elena. How could you? How could I do it? What did I do?" Elena asked, surprised. "I trusted you. I can't believe you would do this." Elena became apprehensive suddenly. She had done a lot of things of late for Nara to question her trust in her. She knew she had never left any loopholes. She ransacked her brain, thinking of what Nara must have possibly found out. "I don't understand you, Nara. What have I done to you? I am so confused right now." "Did you tell Andrew about the contract?" The question threw her off guard. She was not expecting it. She had thought Nara was done asking her questions about the contract. She wondered why she was still bent on finding out. "Answer me." Elena kept silent as she wondered about the right answer to give to her. Part of her felt like it was a trap, that maybe Nara was just trying to get the truth from her. She didn't know exactly what to say. She wondered if she should just come clean or continue defending herself. I didn't," she said finally. Nara burst into laughter. She laughed so hard and it began to make Elena very uncomfortable. "What's funny?" "You know you are a very terrible liar. A very terrible one," Nara said, still laughing. Elena felt her heart drop. It dawned on her that Nara already knew. She immediately wished she had just come clean instead of lying. "Andrew told me that you were the one that told him about it. I trusted you, Elena. How could you do this to me?" "I'm sorry. It was a mistake," Elena said softly. "It was no mistake, because if it was, you would have just come clean about it instead of lying." "Nara, I can explain. You know what bothers me. How did you even meet up with Andrew to discuss me with him? The last I remember, you don't even know him that much to have such conversations, so how?" Nara snapped at her. Elena became afraid. She knew Nara meant business. The look on her face alone sent shivers down her spine. She knew she needed to cook up some excuse as quickly as possible before things worsened. "Nara, please calm down. Let me explain. Do you take me for a fool? Look, I am not ready to listen to any of your cooked-up lies. I have you a chance to redeem yourself, but you were still brazen enough to lie to me. Can you just let me talk?" "No, I do not have time for this. Like I said, I have dinner to prepare for." "Nara, please," Elena begged, holding her right hand. "Just listen to me," she begged. Nara used her left hand to remove Elena's hand. She stared straight into her eyes. "You know, I am beginning to question our friendship. Excuse me," she said, and with that she left, closing the door behind her. Elena couldn't believe what had just happened. Nara had never spoken to her in such a manner before. "Ah!" she exclaimed, hitting her head with her hands, slumped into the chair, panting angrily. She picked up her phone and searched her contacts frantically in search of Andrew's number. Her eyes lit up when she saw his number. She dialed it immediately, and after a few rings he picked up the call. "Hello," Andrew said. "How dare you?" Elena barked at him immediately. "Geez, Elena, what the hell is wrong with you?" "That's the exact question I was supposed to ask you. What the hell is wrong with you?" "How do you mean? What did I do? Andrew asked, his voice etched with confusion. How could you? How could you tell Nara that I was the one that told you about the contract? What contract? Have you suddenly gone dumb? What other contract am I talking about if it's not about Nara and Gordon's marriage? Oh, that. So? What's the big deal about me telling Nara? Because it was a secret, I was not supposed to tell you. Look, you had better think of something to tell he because she is angry with me right now. Elena fired on. Andre sighed. Look, Elena, figure out your problems alone. I have other important things to attend to right now. You think I am joking, right? Wait till she hears about our kiss. You won't dare, Andrew shouted at her over the phone. Try me and see, Elena said and immediately hung up. She was fuming with rage. She needed to do something real fast or else everything she had worked so hard for would crumble in front of her. The phone rang again. She looked at it and saw that it was Andrew calling. She sighed immediately. She was in no mood to say anything to him. She had made her point, and if he dared to disobey her, he was going to see the other side of her he had not seen before. Harry was in his office attending to some files stacked on his table when a knock on his door interrupted him. Come in, he said with a sigh. The door opened and Yvonne walked in. A frown was visible on her face. Harry, on seeing her, smiled and dropped the files in his hands. Yvonne, you didn't tell me you were coming to see me. When have I ever informed you before I came? Harry smiled. What's with the look on your face? Yvonne ignored him. She walked closer to his table. She used her hands to move some of the files on the table to another side and sat down on the table facing him directly. Harry smiled and touched her lap, but she chided him with her hands. Don't touch me, she said amidst sulks. Harry smiled mischievously. What have I done this time around? How could you speak to me in such a manner back there? Do you know how ridiculous that made me look? Harry burst into laughter. Okay, fine, I'm sorry, he said, trying to touch her lap again, but she still removed it. What is it again? Why would you let Nara join us in the rehearsals? After everything I have told you about her, you, of all people, know how much I hate her, she said, sulking. Yvonne, you know I can't handle Nara. You know Gordon as much as I do. I am not ready to lose my job. That's none of my business. Yvonne, you know I can do anything for you, but Nara's case is out of my hands, he said, standing up. He moved his hands around her waist and grabbed her firmly. With a smile, he brought his lips closer to meet Yvonne's. Don't even dare, she said, snapping at him. If you want any of this, she said, touching her body, you know exactly what I want. Do it. With that, she got down from the table and walked out of his office. Harry laughed mischievously as she left. Women, he said, shaking his head, and went back to the files he was working on. Tyler pulled the car to a stop in front of the house. Nara slowly opened the door and stepped out. A lot had happened that day, and she was already feeling overwhelmed. As she got to the entrance of the house, she heard voices which sounded like those of Gordon and Jeffries. She walked inside to see them standing in the long hallway. Nara, you are here, Gordon said, smiling, and walked quickly towards her. As Nara watched him walking towards her smiling, she wondered what kind of man he was. They had shared a kiss the night before, and he acted indifferent about it, or was he pretending? How was your day? He asked her when he finally got close to her. Nara nodded in affirmation with a smile. Have you had anything to eat yet? Then suddenly she remembered she had left the house in haste, and she had had nothing to eat since the day began. Go up and freshen up. I will send someone to get you something to eat, he said, smiling. Nara nodded her head with a smile. Okay then, see you in a while, she said and began to walk. Hey, Jeffrey. She greeted Jeffrey as she climbed up the stairs. Jeffrey did not utter a word. He only nodded his head in response with a curt smile. He waited till Nara was out of sight before he faced Gordon, who had been smiling sheepishly all this while. What? Gordon said when he noticed Jeffrey's scrutinizing gaze on him. Nothing, Jeffrey replied. Come on, that look just can't mean anything. It seems like you guys are cool now. Nara and I? Yes, I saw the way you smiled at her. Gordon became embarrassed immediately. No, I did not, he said, and at the same time he tried to avoid eye contact with Jeffrey. My eyes don't deceive me. Gordon knew Jeffrey was not ready to drop the topic anytime soon. He needed to say something that could avert this attention. "Dad said a visitor would be joining us for dinner," he said, hoping to draw Jeffrey's attention. Jeffrey smiled. He knew exactly what he was trying to do. He decided to drop the Nara talk and raise it possibly another time. "A visitor?" "Yes," Gordon replied. "Do you know who it is?" "Did he mention it?" "No, he just said it was a surprise." "A surprise? Do you think it has something to do with the company?" Gordon kept quiet for a while, then he nodded his head negatively. That's not my dad's style. If it had something to do with the company, it sure would be within the company's premises. Dad separates work from home." Jeffrey sighed. "Well then, you just have to get yourself prepared for this surprise," he said, adjusting his glasses steadily on his face. Gordon nodded. He looked at Jeffrey and smiled. "Hungry?" he asked him. "No," Jeffrey said with a smile. Gordon sighed. "Why don't you ever want to eat here?" "Stella has complained about it." "That's because I'm not hungry." "That's a lie. I even offered a room here for as long as we are in the country, but you have vehemently refused," Gordon lamented, his voice filled with concern. "Come on, Gordon. I thought we dropped the issue of me staying with you already." "I don't know about that," Gordon said. Jeffrey sighed. He knew Gordon so well. He knew he had a large heart despite the mean facade he projected outside. Gordon had taken him as a brother, but he didn't see him like that. In fact, Jeffrey placed Gordon in a position much higher than a brother, hence he felt living with him would be disrespectful. Jeffrey had so much respect for him despite the fact that they were almost the same age. "You don't have to worry. The next time I come around, I promise I will eat something. For now, I need to get going," Jeffrey said. Gordon looked at him and scrutinized him. "It seems like you're in a hurry to leave. Why, if I may ask?" "I am not," Jeffrey cried out in defense. "Yes, you are, and with the way you defended yourself immediately, I am guessing it's a lady." Jeffrey felt his legs weaken. How did Gordon know? He was actually rushing to go to the bakery to see Rose. He looked at Gordon, who gave him a mischievous smile. He was not ready to tell him about Rose yet. He needed to think of some excuses fast. "That's not true. I have a meeting with someone." "Then explain why you have that blush across your cheeks." Jeffrey touched his cheeks in embarrassment, and at the same moment, Gordon burst into laughter. Jeffrey looked at him and laughed too. He knew Gordon was just trying to pull his legs. "This is payback, right?" Jeffrey asked, smiling. "Yes, of course," Gordon replied. Jeffrey had really put him on a big horse when he questioned him about Nara. This sure was a sweet payback. Jeffrey walked up to him and patted him on the back, smiling. "I will get going now," he said, and with that he walked out. Gordon turned to watch him leave, smiling. Jeffrey was like the brother he had always wished to have, although he knew Jeffrey kept his relationship with him at a limit. He shook his head finally and smiled as he turned and headed back upstairs. Nara walked into Het room to see a beautiful white dress lying on the bed. She smiled immediately she saw it. She picked it up quickly in excitement. She felt the thick fabric. She sighed in excitement. The dress had delicate designs, and the shimmering stones around the hem of the dress added an exquisite touch to the dress. She was still admiring the dress when her eyes caught a black box which was placed on the table. She was sure the box was not there when she left early that morning. Placing the dress carefully back on the bed, she walked closer to the table. Lifting the box up, she realized it was from a known brand. She began to wonder about what could be inside the box. She opened it, and immediately her eyes lit up in excitement. It was a set of diamond earrings and a necklace. She had never seen jewelry shine like the way the one she was holding did. She covered her mouth with her hands to refrain herself from shouting in excitement. When he had told her that he could take care of what she could wear for dinner, she was not expecting something this beautiful from him. She couldn't lie. Gordon sure did have an exquisite taste. She dropped the box down on the table carefully and made for the door. She wanted to thank him, but she stopped halfway. She decided to thank him on their way to dinner. First of all, she needed to freshen up. She was in a mood for a bath and not a shower. She entered the bathroom. She filled the bathtub with water and added her liquid soap to it. She undressed herself immediately and rushed inside the bathtub. As she felt the cold water on her body, she felt at ease. She closed her eyes to relax. She ran her hands through her body softly. The scent of her soap was all over the bathroom. She closed her eyes again and laid her head back resting on the bathtub. Then suddenly she remembered her altercation with Elena. She began to wonder if she had done too much or said too much during their altercation. She knew there must have been a reason for Elena to tell Andrew about the contract. She had known Elena for quite a long time. They had both kept each other's secrets. She knew something must have prompted her into telling him. She suddenly began to feel bad. Elena was her best friend. She was like a sister to her. Maybe she should just have given her a listening ear. But on a second thought, she wondered why she had lied to her twice. She began to wonder how Elena had come in contact with Andrew. She knew Elena and Andrew did not know themselves that much to have such discussions about her. She knew something was fishy. She could remember the look on Elena's face when she had accosted her that day. It was not a look of remorse, but that of fear. She was still in her thoughts when she was interrupted by a knock on the door. Nara opened her eyes immediately. She wondered who it might be. Then she remembered that Gordon had said something about someone getting her something to eat. "Come in," she shouted from the bathroom, hoping that whosoever was knocking could hear. Luckily for her, the door swung open. "Ma'am?" Nara recognized the voice to be that of Mel. "I'm in the bathroom," Mara shouted. "Your food is here." "Okay, drop it on the table." "Okay, ma'am," Mel said, and walked straight to the table. She placed the tray of food on the table, and as she made to leave, her eyes caught the white dress which was lying on the bed. Her eyes lit up in surprise. It was the most beautiful dress she had ever seen in her life. As she looked at the dress the more, she became tempted to touch it. She wanted to feel the fabric, she wanted to touch the shiny stones. As she felt closer and bent to touch it, she had noises coming from the hallway. She withdrew her hands immediately and jolted out of the room, shutting the door in haste. The bang made the door not to close properly. She passed Gordon, who was walking to his room. She bowed curtly and scurried down the stairs. Gordon nodded at her and made straight for his room. As he reached his door, he turned towards Nara's room. Then he realized the door was not properly shut. He got closer to the door and peered inside. She was not in the room. He walked inside, closing the door behind him. Everywhere was quite quiet. He began to wonder where she might have gone to. "Nara?" he called out. Meanwhile, Nara was still inside the bathroom. Her eyes were shut, and she was resting, enjoying the cold feeling of the water on her body, and she had not noticed when he came in. When she heard her name, she jolted up immediately. "I'm in the bathroom!" she shouted. At that moment, the lather from the soap entered her eyes. "Ouch!" Nara cried out in pain. "What is it? What happened?" Gordon asked, alarmed, and made to enter the bathroom. "Don't come in here, I'm naked," Nara said immediately. Gordon immediately stopped in his tracks. "Ouch! My eyes!" Nara cried again, running her eyes. It was as if the more she rubbed it, the worse it became. "What happened?" Gordon asked, his voice etched with concern. "Soap lather got into my eyes," she cried out. "Don't rub it, it will get worse." "Ouch!" Nara cried again. "Should I come in?" No, don't get Stella or Mel," she shouted. Gordon knew that there was no time for that. He needed to swing into action. He closed his eyes and shut them tightly, using his hands to navigate his way into the bathroom. "I said you shouldn't come in here," Nara cried when she noticed his presence. "Don't worry, my eyes are shut, I promise." "How am I sure you are not lying? Do you want my help or not?" Nara kept quiet. Gordon took her quietness as an approval. He found the towel worth his hands. He walked towards the bathtub and opened it widely. Before she knew what was happening, he had swapped her out of the bathtub. Nara shut her eyes tightly. This was the worst embarrassment in her entire life. Nara shut her eyes tightly. She could not believe what exactly was happening. Gordon was actually carrying her out of the bathtub naked. This was the height of shame she had experienced. "Don't you dare open your eyes," she said, and gripped his arms tightly with her hands. "With the way you are holding me, I don't think that would be possible." "Huh?" "Gordon, I promise you if you open your eyes, Quit talking and let me find my way," he said as he walked slowly out of the bathroom. "You know you could have just given me the towel to clean my eyes instead of carrying me out like that." Gordon suddenly realized his mistake. He could feel water on his body coming from the wet towel. He sure had made a mistake. He continued walking slowly till he reached the bedroom. He dropped her gently on the bed. Nara sat on the bed rubbing her eyes. At that same moment, he wanted to look around to get something dry for her to use and clean her eyes. Then he realized that he would have to open his eyes in the process. A thought suddenly came to his mind. He unbuttoned his shirt quickly and handed it to her. "Here," he said. "What is that?" Nara asked him, still rubbing her eyes. "My shirt. You know this is what you could have done rather than carrying me out. Now look, the bed is wet. Just have it, will you? My eyes are already itching me for being shut for a long time." Nara sighed. She stretched out her hand in search of his shirt. When she felt it, she grabbed it quickly. "I will get going now," Gordon said and turned to leave. Nara said nothing. She cleaned her eyes with the shirt and stopped when she heard the sound of the door shutting. She slowly opened her eyes. Although her vision was blurry, it didn't hurt that much anymore. "Ah!" she screamed. What was she even thinking about allowing him to carry her out? She quickly got up from bed and looked around. Everything had happened so fast. She noticed that the soap lather was still on some part of her body. She did not have enough time to rinse her body before Gordon came in. "Did he see me naked?" she asked herself, holding the wet towel to her chest. She rebuffed the idea immediately. Gordon could be many things, but not a pervert. With that, she rushed back to the bathroom to rinse her body well. Meanwhile, Gordon entered his room shirtless as he hit the door behind him. He still stood by the door, his mind twirling on what had just happened. Was he that dumb to not have given her something dry to clean her eyes? What was he even thinking about carrying her out? Now he had made a fool of himself. He could not help but wonder what she could be thinking right now. He walked to his bed and sat down. If only he had just handed her the towel or something dry, he wouldn't be in the mess he was. He heaved a sigh of frustration and walked straight to his bathroom to freshen up. He needed to be ready on time to leave for dinner at his father's place. Yvonne sat in front of her dress mirror applying her makeup when her phone rang. She looked at it and the caller ID indicated that it was Briston. She picked it up. "Hello?" she said. "Hey babe, are you done?" Briston said from the other end. "I am not yet done. I have just started getting ready," she replied. "Okay then, I will send someone to pick you up. Lest I forget, wear something pretty because I have a surprise installed for you." Yvonne's eyes lit up. "A surprise?" "Yes, one that you would love very much." "Wow, I can't wait for this surprise," she said, her voice etched in excitement. Briston laughed. "You sure will love this one, I promise." "Okay, babe," Yvonne said amidst smiles. "Bye, see you soon," he replied and hung up the call. Yvonne placed the phone back on the table, smiling. She wondered at the kind of surprise Briston was planning in front of his family members, for that matter. All the same, she knew she had to be ready for anything. She looked at herself in the mirror. She was satisfied with her makeup. She needed to look her best for the family dinner. She was not going to let Nara outshine her like she did the other time. She opened the drawer and took out a black box. Opening it, she smiled. It was the diamond necklace Briston had gifted her. She was going to wear it. She placed it on her neck, admiring the stone as it shimmered. "Let's see Nara beat this," she said, smiling. Suddenly the door opened immediately, which gave her quite a shock. She turned to see Hwen standing by the door. "Mom, can't you knock? You scared me." Gwen ignored her and shut the door. "What's that on your neck?" she asked her when she noticed the shining diamond necklace. "Oh, this. Briston gave it to me as a gift," Yvonne said, smiling as she turned for her mother to have a clear view of the necklace. Gwen walked closer and touched the necklace. "It's beautiful," she said with her eyes widening in excitement. "This must be very expensive." Yvonne nodded in approval. "Do you plan on wearing it for dinner at the Antonovs?" "Of course, Mum. I need to look my best. Elle need to look 10 times better than Nara." "Let me see her beat this," Yvonne said, still admiring the necklace. Gwen took the necklace from her hands and walked behind her. She shifted her hair to the side and placed the necklace on her neck. She gently hooked the necklace together. "You look very beautiful with this on you." "I know, Mum. I have a mirror in front of me." They both burst into laughter. "Silly girl," Gwen said, hitting her head lightly. "Guess what, Mum? Briston says he has a surprise for me." "A surprise?" "Yes, Mum, and I'm so excited. I can't wait to see what the surprise is. Gwen sighed irritatedly. She hated when Briston's name was brought up in any of her conversations. She had never liked Briston, but the hatred fused the more ever since her altercation with Penelope. Whatever it is, I hope it's something reasonable, she said finally with a sigh. Yvonne looked at her mother from the mirror and smiled. She knew what was on her mind. Nara will be coming for dinner, right? Yes, Mom. Don't forget to put her in her place. With everything she did to me today, I don't think I will waste any chance I get to humiliate her. Gwen suddenly became surprised. What happened? Mom, you wouldn't even believe it if I told you. It still feels like a dream to me. Tell me, what happened? Yvonne cleared her throat. You know we had a briefing for a runway show that will be held in a few weeks to come. Yes, Gwen replied. Guess who I saw there, Mum? Nara. Why? What was she doing there? I thought newly signed models are not allowed to walk the runway till after a period of time, Gwen asked, confused. That was the same question I asked myself, Mum, when I saw her. What happened afterward? Well, I approached her, but Mum, you needed to have seen the insult she hauled at me. What? Gwen exclaimed. To make matters worse, she threatened me with Gordon. At the mention of Gordon, Gwen kept quiet and sighed. She went to her head and sat down. Yvonne, surprised at her unusual quietness, stood up. Mum, you are not saying anything. That's because there is nothing to say. Yvonne folded her hands and began to sulk. Now let me tell you, once you get to the Antonovs' mansion, make sure you act nice to Gordon so at least his anger towards you might be reduced. Mum, it's not as easy as you said. He is so unapproachable. Gwen looked at her and sighed. Come and sit beside me. Yvonne walked confused and sat beside her. You remember that night your father came back home angry? That night he was so angry he didn't even say dinner. Yvonne kept quiet for a while. Then suddenly her eyes lit up. Yes. Yes, Mum. Do you know where he was coming from that night? Work, of course. Where else? He was coming from Gordon's house. Gordon's house? What did he go there to do? He made an investment deal offer for him, but Gordon turned it down, but not without calling your father names. What? That's not true, Mum. Your father can't be telling lies. Gordon called his investment plan a child's play and asked him to leave the house. What? Yvonne exclaimed as her eyes reddened. Who the hell does he think he is? Why would he even think of talking to Daddy like that? You don't need to worry. I will handle him when the time comes. No one messes with the Vesper Times and goes scot-free. Mum, what are you planning on doing? Gwen smiled and looked at her. Leave all the hard work for me. All you have to do is get dressed and attend the dinner. Make sure you get his attention. Leave the rest for me. Yvonne smiled. She knew her mother. She had never made any promise and did not keep it. The look in her eyes showed that she was serious about what she said. Okay, Mum, Yvonne said with a smile. I will leave you now to get dressed, Gwen said, standing up and headed straight for the door. You know I will always protect you no matter what, right? She said. Yvonne nodded her head in affirmation, smiling. I love you, Mum. I love you, my child, Gwen said with a smile and walked out of the room, closing the door behind her. Yvonne smiled. She got up and went straight to the wardrobe. She ransacked through the clothes inside her wardrobe. Suddenly, her eyes caught a white dress hanging on the wardrobe. She looked at the dress. She had not worn it ever since she bought it. She smiled and took it out. Now this is the perfect dress, she said as she ran her fingers on the fabric of the dress. She turned to her long-standing mirror, which was also in her wardrobe. She placed the dress on her body, admiring it. It had a slit straight her lap. As she stared at her reflection in the mirror, she remembered her altercation with Nara again, and her face squeezed into a frown. She could still remember the look Vanessa gave her when Harry supported Nara. She had wanted to make a good impression on her, but with the way things went that day, she was sure Vanessa would not even be a fan of hers anymore. She knew she had a reputation in Dynasty. She was seen as the queen of Dynasty, but with the way Nara spoke to her that day, she was sure things would possibly change. Nara was someone even Harry, who had always had her back, was afraid to touch. She knew she needed to get power, something that everyone would fear. Gordon was the only way she would do it, Nara. You might think you are all that right now because you are married to Gordon. I bet you won't see me coming. I promise I will hit you so badly you won't be able to find your balance. You probably might join that thing you call a mother in the grave, she said with a mischievous smirk on her lips. Gordon stood before his dressing mirror, combing his hair with precision. His mind wandered to the dinner his father was hosting, and he wondered who the mysterious guest could be. He wondered if the mysterious guest had something to do with him or Nara. After smoothing out his hair, he placed the comb down and admired his reflection. He wore a tailored black tuxedo suit, complete with a bow tie. Noticing a slight imperfection, he adjusted the tie with a quick tweak. Glancing at his watch, Gordon saw it was a miniature past the hour of 7. His curiosity about the evening's events lingered, but he was determined to make a good impression, no matter who the guest turned out to be. With a final nod at his reflection, Gordon felt prepared for the night. He pondered if Nara was ready yet, but decided against checking on her. He still felt that she was still upset about the whole bathroom incident that had happened earlier. He knew the actions he took were uncalled for. He had actually invaded her privacy, although he only wanted to help her. He sighed deeply. What better time to apologize if not now, he said finally. He looked around to check if he was forgetting anything. Feeling content with everything, he walked out of the room, shutting the door behind him. He walked towards Nara's room. He placed his head on the door, hoping to hear any sound, but it was dead silent. He placed his hand on the doorknob and he tried to open it, but he stopped. He didn't want to do anything that would infuriate her anymore. He gently knocked on the door. Who is it? Nara's soft voice asked from inside the room. It's me, Gordon said almost immediately. Come in. Gordon was taken aback, surprised by her effortless welcome. Had she forgiven him already? He gently pushed open the door to find her struggling to fasten the necklace he had given her. The vision before him took his breath away. She was already dressed in the stunning white gown he had chosen, her beauty radiating like an angel. The fitted bodice accentuated her curves, and the flowing skirt fell elegantly around her feet. Her long dark hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall, and her bright smile lit up the room. Her brown eyes sparkled as she tried to secure the delicate necklace, its tiny diamonds glinting in the light. Gordon couldn't help but admire his own excellent taste. The dress fit her perfectly, and she looked absolutely captivating. He felt a surge of pride and affection, his heart skipping a beat as he gazed at her loveliness. You are dressed already, Nara said, looking at him. She was still battling with the necklace. Yes, he said. His eyes darted to her hands as she struggled to hook the necklace. Her facial expression was very funny. He couldn't help but chuckle lightly. Hold on, let me help you with that, he offered finally and walked closer to her. Don't worry, I can do it, Nara said. Nara, you are clearly battling with it. Just hand it over. Let me help you with it, Gordon said softly. Nara looked at him, then slowly she handed the necklace to him. Gordon took it from her and walked behind her. He used his right hand to gather her long black hair and gently moved it to the front. He leaned closer to her. With a practiced motion, he placed the necklace on her neck. Nara felt his breath on her neck. He smelt like mint, a mature type of mint. She wished he could continue standing behind her. She loved his breath across her neck. But her joy was soon short-lived when she felt his hands leave her neck. All done, Gordon said, smiling. Oh, thank you, Nara said, touching the necklace and at the same time admiring it. It looks good on you. Huh? The necklace and the dress? They look good on you? Oh, it's all thanks to you. You don't look bad yourself, she said, smiling. Gordon nodded his head. I wanted to apologize. Nara turned and faced him properly. For what, exactly? For the rash decision I made earlier. Nara knew he was talking about the bathroom incident, but he didn't need to apologize. He acted rashly because she needed help. She too needed to apologize for shouting at him. You don't need to apologize, you were only trying to help, and if anyone should apologize, it should be me. Gordon was surprised. A few hours ago she almost raised a tantrum, but now she was speaking so softly and nicely. I am sorry for raising my voice. It was uncalled for. You were only trying to help. I should have been more appreciative, she said softly. Gordon was surprised and smiled. Finally, he was relieved. He was greatly troubled thinking she was angry with him. Okay then, I will be waiting for you downstairs. Okay, Nara replied. Can I ask you a question? Nara said all of a sudden. I hope I am not in trouble, Gordon said, smiling. Oh no, you are not, it's just a harmless question. Okay, go on. Last night why did you kiss me, and why are you pretending like nothing happened? Gordon felt his heart stop. Why was she asking this question all of a sudden? He was thinking that she had forgotten all about it. Why was she bringing it up? He touched her shoulders. We can talk about this when we get back, can we? He asked her, hoping she would see sense in what he was saying. Nara stared at him for a while, then nodded her head in approval. They were actually running late. Maybe when they got back they would talk about it. Okay? Then she said finally. Gordon nodded his head curtly before leaving the room, closing the door behind him. As soon as Gordon had left, Nara couldn't help but smile. The moment he stepped into her room, she was captivated by his chiseled features and striking appearance. His piercing eyes seemed to hold a deep warmth, making her heart skip a beat. She was drawn to his strong jawline, accentuated by a subtle stubble that added to his rugged charm. His lips, curled into a gentle smile, made her feel weak in the knees. As he approached her to help with the necklace, his broad shoulders and lean physique became apparent. His steady breath on her neck sent shivers down her spine, and she couldn't help but remember the sensation. His fingers brushed against her skin, sending a wave of electricity through her body. She was struck by the contrast between his rough, masculine hands and the gentle way he touched her. Gordon's dark hair was perfectly messy, framing his face in a way that made his sharp features even more pronounced. His eyes sparkled with kindness, putting her at ease despite the butterflies in her stomach. Even his voice, low and smooth, made her feel like she was melting into his words. Nara couldn't deny the attraction she felt towards Gordon. He was, without a doubt, hot and charming, with a captivating presence that left her breathless. Miriam sat on the bed already dressed for dinner. She was bare feet and she played with her feet as she hummed a song and at the same time staring into oblivion. She wore a mint-colored dress and her hair was neatly packed to a bum. Makeup had been applied on her face to hide her pale, frail face. She looked sick and frail. She held a doll in her hands tightly or wanting to let go of it. Peter opened the door to the room and walked in, his face etched with worry. Immediately he saw her. He heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed his face. Miriam, I have been searching for you all this while. So this is where you have been hiding, he said at the same time, walking quickly towards her. She kept quiet, still staring at oblivion. Peter noticed the doll in her hands. He shook his head sadly. He began to contemplate if he would actually take her with him for dinner at the Antonovs'. He feared that she might cause a scene, but Jacob had begged him to bring her along with him, and he had already promised to. He looked at her neck. It was bare and bony. She needed to wear a necklace. He walked into the wardrobe, pulled out a drawer which contained all her jewelry. He shook his head sadly when he saw the dust that had encroached on the jewel. He couldn't remember the last time she had dressed herself up. He was sure the jewelry drawer had not been opened. He had left everything as it was, even when they traveled abroad. This was also the first time he had been opening her jewelry drawer since she took ill. He looked at each jewel in search of the perfect one that would suit her dress. Then his eyes widened in excitement. He saw a silver necklace which was at the bottom of the jewelry box. He picked it up and smiled. This will fit perfectly with her dress, he said, and with that, he closed the drawer and walked back inside the room to where she was seated. He held her by the hands and led her straight to the dressing mirror. He pulled a seat out for her to seat and helped her sit down. He gently placed the necklace on her neck and hooked it with a practiced motion. Then he looked at her in the mirror. Although she looked frail, he could still see some traces of her beauty. As he continued staring at her reflection in the mirror, to his surprise, she lifted her hands and touched her necklace. "Do you like it?" he asked her in excitement. But she kept quiet. She continued touching and admiring the necklace. "Miriam, so you like it?" Peter asked her again. This time she lifted her head and looked at him. "Where are we going to?" she asked him suddenly. Peter smiled. "We are going to Jacob's house. They have invited us over." "Jacob?" Miriam asked, confused. "Yes, Jacob. You remember him, right?" Miramar shook her head negatively. "Come on now, Gordon's dad." Immediately she heard him mention Gordon. Her eyes lit up in excitement. Gordon. Gordon is Simon's friend. Gordon is our son's friend. Peter, where is our son? She asked, and tears welled up in her eyes. She faced the mirror again and kept on staring at her reflection, not saying a single word again. Peter sighed. He was not surprised. He was already used to her. Most times she acted as if she was back to normal. Then in a blink of an eye she would return back to her depressed, moody self. He gently pulled the doll from her hands. She let go of it. It was as if she didn't feel his touch. She just kept lousy her reflection. In a way, he blamed himself. He knew he shouldn't have mentioned Gordon's name. Gordon and their son were childhood best friends. Miriam had always been fond of Gordon because of his closeness to their son. He knew the mention of Gordon's name would trigger her.